Andy Swiss from BBC News. Welcome to Chelsea.
Thanks.
7 years ago, Jose Mourinho sat where you are and announced he was the special one. Are you a special one?
Maybe I should be called a group one. I want to group people together to be successful, and that's my objective.
Chelsea Football Club would once again find themselves with a new manager in the dugouts in the summer of 2011. Roman Abramovich would turn to Andre Villas-Boas, a 33-year-old Portuguese manager who had just led Porto to an undefeated league season, on top of winning the Portuguese Cup and the UEFA Europa League. Ancelotti was sacked for a trophyless 2010-2011 season, despite delivering the double in his first season. Chelsea would somewhat take a gamble with Villas-Boas. Despite his impressive CV and evident Mourinho comparisons, he had only had one full season as a manager. His age raised some eyebrows as well, as he was close to the age of the senior players at the club, with goalkeeper Hilario being 2 years older than him, and there were suggestions that he may find it difficult to command their respect. The Portuguese had started his coaching career as a teenager, working under Bobby Robson, as they had lived in the same apartment block in Portugal when the Englishman was managing Porto. Villas-Boas would incredibly write letters and speak to Robson, often about football, and as a Porto fan he had raised his concerns about certain decisions he made. Eventually he would impress the legendary English manager, and Robson would take him under his wing. Villas-Boas would then work under Jose Mourinho as a scout, so he certainly wasn't a stranger to Chelsea. Eventually, AVB would fly the nest and have a brief but impressive stint at Académica before taking Porto to glory in 2010-2011. Chelsea would activate a world record release clause for a football manager. It was €50 million to gain the services of the so-called new special one. Steve Holland would be his assistant, and so would club legends Roberto Di Matteo and Eddie Newton. Young promising prospect Thibaut Courtois was signed from Genk. The Belgian goalkeeper was then loaned out to Atletico Madrid and would remain with the Spaniards until 2014. Fellow Belgian Romelu Lukaku was also signed from Anderlecht. The striker was one of the most wanted young players in Europe and was making headlines. He broke into Anderlecht's team at the age of 16, and by the time Chelsea had signed him, he scored 41 goals in 98 appearances. He was dubbed the new Drogba by the media, and Lukaku revealed that Chelsea's number 11 was his hero. 19-year-old defensive midfielder Oriol Romeu was signed from Barcelona. Brazilian teenager Lucas Piazon was also signed from Sao Paulo respectively. The marquee signing was definitely 23-year-old attacking player Juan Mata, who was signed from Valencia. He would be Chelsea's new number 10, as Yossi Benayoun would depart for Arsenal on a season-long loan on deadline day. As one midfielder left on the final day of the summer window, one arrived. Raul Meireles would be signed from Liverpool in a surprising move. The summer transfer window signings was a clear sign that the club was building for the future. The old guard of John Terry, Ashley Cole, Frank Lampard and Didier Drogba were all in their 30s in this time period, with goalkeeper Petr Cech not far off that age bracket. The most notable exits after Yossi Benayoun going to Arsenal was youth players Fabio Borini and Michael Mancian leaving on a permanent basis. Mancian was highly thought of at the club and impressed on loan spells at Queen's Park Rangers and Wolves respectively, and the former Young Player of the Year was tipped to become a Chelsea regular in the future. However, it was not meant to be, and he was sold to German club Hamburg. Yuri Zhirkov would return to Russia after 2 years at Chelsea, signing for Anzi Makalaka. The Russian only scored one goal for Chelsea, but it was certainly one to remember, as it was a stunning goal in his native homeland in the previous season's Champions League. Many Chelsea players would leave in the summer for loan spells, as the club were steering towards a new transfer model. Chelsea were now in a partnership with Dutch club Vitesse Arnhem, and players would be bought, loaned out, and either sold for a profit or hopefully a pathway into the first team. Chelsea would have a very good pre-season, unlike the previous one, winning 7 out of 7 and conceding just 1 goal as the club won the pre-season Barclays Asia Trophy. The team would go into the season with confidence, and the Villas-Boas era would begin at the Britannia Stadium away to Stoke. A very tricky first game for Chelsea's new manager, and it would end 0-0. But the Blues would start the season with a clean sheet and a point, and generally played quite well on the positive side. This was the first time in 10 years Chelsea had failed to win the opening Premier League game. West Brom would visit Stamford Bridge on matchday 2, and the Blues were hoping to repeat the scoreline of last season, but this time the Baggies would be more difficult to beat as the hosts edged the 2-1 win. Hilario would play the remaining games in August as Cech was out injured, and he would be beaten by a good early finish by Irish striker Shane Long, but Nicolas Anelka would score Chelsea's first goal of the season, equalising in the second half. Florent Malouda would end up getting the winner, as Villas-Boas' first game at Stamford Bridge would end in a win, but admittedly not the most convincing. The following game was another one at the Bridge. This time, new boys Norwich City were the visitors, and they were beaten 3-1. Jose Busquets' stunning goal put Chelsea 1-0 up. Grant Holt would equalise for the Canaries in the second half after a miscommunication between Hilario and Ivanovic. Not long after, Drogba would be knocked unconscious after a clash with John Ruddy and had to be stretchered off. He would be out of action for a while. Norwich's goalkeeper would then be sent off for fouling Ramirez in the penalty area, and Frank Lampard would convert his penalty. Lukaku would come off the bench and make his debut for the club on this day, as did Juan Mata, who made an instant impact and would score in pretty much the last kick of the game, much to the delight of the Chelsea fans. Bayer Leverkusen, Valencia and Genk would join Chelsea in Group E of the Champions League. After their international break, the Blues won their third game in a row with a 2-1 win away to Sunderland. The Champions League would kick off at home to Bayer Leverkusen, and David Luiz would make his first start of the season. The Brazilian would have a brilliant game as he broke the deadlock with a fine goal. Juan Mata got his second goal for the club as he wrapped up a 2-0 win over the Germans. Former Blue Michael Ballack was welcomed back at Stamford Bridge. The next game, AVB would suffer his first loss as Chelsea manager. It was another defeat at Old Trafford as Man United beat Chelsea 3-1. Chris Smalling's header put the champions 1-0 up before Nani's rocket goal would double their lead. Chelsea would then go into half-time 3-0 down after Rooney capitalised on poor defending by the Blues. Torres would only get his second goal for the club in the second half with an impressive finish. He almost got another one but missed an open goal and was subject to ridicule. Rooney would slip and miss a penalty as Chelsea avoided absolute humiliation. The hunt for the first trophy to win of the season was up next. Neighbours Fulham visited Stamford Bridge in the third round of the Carling Cup. Lukaku and Romeo made their first starts for Chelsea. Petr Cech would be forced off at half-time with an injury and would be replaced by Ross Turnbull. After fouling Kieran Fry in the penalty area, centre-back Alex would be sent off, but Turnbull was the hero as he saved Kasami's penalty. The tie would eventually go to penalties after a goalless 120 minutes. Lampard surprisingly missed his penalty, and Zamora gave Fulham early advantage. Luiz coolly converted. Former Blue Sidwell kept Fulham in front. John Terry scored his penalty. Turnbull would save Moussa Dembele's penalty to keep Chelsea in the cup. Kalu's brilliant penalty would level. Baird of Fulham and Malouda would convert theirs respectively. Brian Ruiz would hit the bar, meaning Chelsea would scrape through to the next round of the cup. This was Chelsea's only second penalty shootout win in 9. Premier League debutant Swansea would visit Stamford Bridge the next game. Juan Mata's beautiful ball set up Torres to get his second league goal in 2 games with a fine finish. Ramirez would then put the Blues 2-0 up after nutmegging Vorm. However, Chelsea would suffer a second red card in as many games, as Torres would go from hero to villain, and he would be sent off straight away for a studs-up challenge on Mark Gower, but Ramirez would get his second goal of the afternoon to ease any tension around the bridge. Ashley Williams would get a consolation goal before Drogba made his comeback from the injury against Norwich and wrapped up the 4-1 win with his first goal of the season. Valencia away was matchday 2 of the Champions League group stage. Lampard would give the Blues a deserved lead in his return to the side, but a late penalty from Roberto Soldado would share the points. Bolton away, one of Chelsea's favourite away grounds to play at, was the next match, and it would be a 9th consecutive win for the Blues at the Reebok Stadium, a resounding 5-1 win. Frank Lampard, who just loved scoring against Bolton, would answer his critics who suggested that his best days were behind him, scoring a hat-trick, his 5th in a Chelsea shirt. Daniel Sturridge, who spent the second half of the previous season on loan there, scoring 8 goals in 12 appearances, got a brace. Everton would then be beaten 3-1 in the next game at the Bridge, but there were concerns with the lack of clean sheets Chelsea were getting, only 3 in 11, but the Blues would show their quality in their next game against Genk in the Champions League, as Chelsea would comfortably dispatch the Belgians 5-0. David Luiz was seen putting his hand on Torres' head and doing some sort of pre-match ritual prayer for the striker. Chelsea's number 9 would end up scoring a brace after Morales would score his first goal for the club. Ivanovic and Kalou would round up the win in easily the best performance under Villas-Boas' management so far in the season. On Sunday, 23rd of October 2011, Chelsea would make a short trip to Loftus Road to square off against Premier League new boys Queen's Park Rangers in the West London derby. It was the first Premier League game between the sides since March 1996. It was a horrible afternoon for the Blues, as QPR would win 1-0 after Heiger Helgeson's penalty would earn them the bragging rights in the derby. Jose Buswinga and Didier Drogba both got sent off in the first half. However, this game is overshadowed by the John Terry and Anton Ferdinand incident. The Chelsea captain was accused of racially abusing QPR's defender. Video footage showed Terry using the words during a heated exchange, which he claimed was a sarcastic repetition of words he thought Ferdinand had accused him of saying, not an insult. Ferdinand, unaware of the remarks during the game, learned of them afterward via YouTube footage. The incident led to a criminal investigation. In July 2012, John Terry was acquitted in court, with the judge ruling it was impossible to prove the words were used as an insult, citing possible misunderstanding. However, the Football Association conducted its own inquiry, finding John Terry guilty of using abusive language with a racial reference, resulting in a 4-match ban and a £220,000 fine in September 2012. Terry admitted using the words, but maintained they were not intended as abuse. The fallout was significant. John Terry was stripped of the England captaincy again, prompting manager Fabio Capello's resignation. Terry retired from international football after the hearing, and the incident strained relationships with the players, notably with Anton's brother, Rio Ferdinand, who was a former friend of John Terry's. A testing cup tie away to Everton in the League Cup would follow. Anelka would miss a penalty early in the game, but Chelsea still broke the deadlock not long after, thanks to Yang Mucker spilling Solomon Kalou's soft effort. Saha would be brought down in the penalty area by keeper Ross Turnbull, and he would then be sent off. It seemed like a regular occurrence in the season, as it was the 5th time a Chelsea player saw red. Cech would come off the bench and Chelsea's number 1 would save Leighton Baines' penalty, but Everton would get a goal and send the tie to extra time thanks to Louis Saha, who loved to score against Chelsea. It was then 10-on-10 as Everton's Royston Drenthe would be sent off in the second half of extra time. Daniel Sturridge would end up getting the winner as he pounced on another mistake by Everton's keeper in an entertaining game at Goodison Park. It would be back-to-back London derby losses in the Premier League, as Chelsea would concede 5 goals at Stamford Bridge for the first time since 1989, as Arsenal came out 5-3 winners. Drogba, who of course was serving a suspension for being sent off the week prior at QPR, was sorely missed, as he loved scoring against the Gunners. However, Wenger's men would expose Chelsea's high line and would leave the Bridge with all 3 points. The Blues could only get a point away in Belgium against Genk in the Champions League in a frustrating 1-1 draw. A first clean sheet away win would follow, with a 1-0 win away to Blackburn thanks to Frank Lampard. However, after the international break, Chelsea would lose against Liverpool in the Premier League. Max Rodriguez gave the Reds the lead in the first half. Daniel Sturridge equalised, but former Chelsea man Glenn Johnson would get a very late winner, as Chelsea suffered back-to-back Premier League defeats at Stamford Bridge for the first time since May 2002. The Blues would then suffer another massive blow, this time in the Champions League, as Bayer Leverkusen would stun visitors with a very late 91st minute winner. The Germans secured their place in the last 16 tie, whilst Chelsea simply had to win their final group game against Valencia. The following Saturday was a comfortable 3-0 win over Wolves, but AVB's men would lose once again to Liverpool and were knocked out of the Carling Cup in another bitter loss to the Reds, who would go on to win the competition. It was now 4 defeats in a row to the Merseysiders. 3 defeats in 4 in the space of 10 days would pile the pressure on Andre Villas-Boas. December started off really well for Chelsea, as they produced a very good performance away to Newcastle, winning 3-0. Lampard missed a penalty, but Drogba, Kalou and Daniel Sturridge earned the Blues a morale-boosting win. Valencia in the Champions League was up next for Chelsea, and they simply could not afford any slip-up. The hosts would do the job, as an early goal from Drogba settled the nerves around Stamford Bridge. Ramirez would score just under 20 minutes later to put Chelsea in the driving seat, and the man for the big occasion, Didier Drogba, would make it game-setting match, as Chelsea comfortably won 3-0 once again. To make things better, Genk would do Chelsea a favour, as they surprisingly drew against Leverkusen, which meant Chelsea topped their Champions League group. On Monday, 12th of December 2011, Chelsea would host Premier League leaders Manchester City. Mario Balotelli gave the away side a very early lead. Raul Meireles would equalise in the 34th minute. City's left-back, Gael Clichy, would then be sent off in the 58th minute. Frank Lampard's penalty would earn Chelsea a massive 2-1 win, and the Blues were the first team in the Premier League to beat Man City. However, just as it seemed that Chelsea turned the corner, the Blues would draw their next 3 games 1-1. The year of 2011 would finish just as it started, a home game against Aston Villa. It was a very miserable way to end the year. Drogba would score his 150th goal for the club, but celebrations would be cut short as Stephen Ireland equalised just 5 minutes later. Sylvain Petrov and Darren Bent's late goals would earn Villa their first away win at the Bridge in 10 years. It was fair to say that Stamford Bridge was not the fortress it once was. Chelsea's winter form in 2011 was quite parallel to the season before. It was also fair to say that the Premier League title would not be coming back to Stamford Bridge this season. Nicolas Anelka would then depart Chelsea Football Club on the 1st of January 2012 and would leave for Chinese club Shanghai Shenhua. The Frenchman was a fine player for the Blues, winning the Golden Boot in the 2008-2009 season, and was a real key player in the trophies the team had won during his time. Later in the month, centre-back Alex would also depart the club. After falling down the pecking order, he would join PSG, reuniting with former manager Carlo Ancelotti, a powerhouse of a centre-back who is known for his unbelievably powerful free kicks. Alex was for sure one of the most underrated players to ever wear the Chelsea shirt. The first match of 2012 would begin with a dramatic away win at Wolverhampton Wanderers. Ramirez put the Blues 1-0 up. Stephen Ward would get an equaliser in the 84th minute. However, Frank Lampard would make sure that Chelsea came away with all 3 points as he scored the winner, and Chelsea came away with a much needed win. Chelsea would then beat Portsmouth 4-0 in the replay of the 2010 final in the third round of the FA Cup the following week. However, the scoreline was a flattering one. Lampard would score again as Chelsea beat Sunderland 1-0 at Stamford Bridge. Michael Essien finally made his first appearance of the season. Chelsea would then announce the signing of Gary Cahill from Bolton Wanderers. Drogba and Kalou would also depart for international duties for the African Cup of Nations, and Chelsea would then take a trip to Carrow Road in the early kick-off, a real chance for Fernando Torres to shine up front. However, it was a very disappointing result and performance as it would end 0-0. Annoyingly, it was Norwich's first clean sheet since they returned to the Premier League, and it was now 15 games since Torres scored for the Blues. Chelsea would then gain revenge on QPR for the defeat earlier in the season, as the Blues would progress to the fifth round of the FA Cup with a 1-0 win at Loftus Road. The game was overshadowed by John Terry and Anton Ferdinand's personal problems, where the FA agreed that the clubs did not have to undertake the traditional pre-match handshakes. Terry was booed every time he touched the ball, but it would not affect the skipper's performance as Chelsea would win 1-0 thanks to Juan Mata's penalty. Swansea away would be the midweek trip for the Blues just 3 days later. Former Chelsea player Scott Sinclair gave the Welsh side the lead but refused to celebrate. It looked like the Swans would come away with the 3 points when Ashley Cole got sent off in the 86th minute, but Jose Buswinga's deflected cross would ultimately be given as a Neil Taylor own goal gave the Blues a very fortunate point. Chelsea would invest in youth again by signing young players Patrick Bamford from Nottingham Forest and Kevin De Bruyne from Genk on deadline day. The latter was loaned straight back to Genk and remained there until the end of the season. The likes of Josh McEachran, Gael Kakuta and Van Aanholt would be loaned out. These players were promoted in the team by Ancelotti the season before, and they looked like the future of the club at one point. However, they would never play for Chelsea Football Club again, as they would have multiple loans over the years at different clubs and would be sold years later. On Sunday, 5th of February 2012, Chelsea would host Manchester United, looking to end a horrible run against the Red Devils. Gary Cahill would make his debut for the club, and Chelsea made an incredible start. Johnny Evans' own goal put the Blues 1-0 up. Juan Mata scored a fantastic volley thanks to a brilliant cross from Fernando Torres shortly after the second half started. Luiz would then score a header from a Mata free kick, and Chelsea were in dreamland as they were 3-0 up against the champions. However, joy was short-lived as Man United clawed 3 goals back to share the spoils. Rooney converted his first penalty. United were then awarded another penalty. However, this was no doubt a very bad call from the referee. United's number 10 would score once again, and Javier Hernandez would get United's equaliser. De Gea would produce an amazing save from Juan Mata in the dying moments to deny a dramatic win. A draw, but this very much felt like a defeat.
Gary, what an introduction. It was a sort of harem-scarum mad game, wasn't it?
Yeah, in at the deep end, I think, one eye today. So disappointing in the end. Obviously, fantastic start, but we've come away there and it's a sickening feeling like you've lost the game, to be honest with you. The mood's a bit flat and we're disappointed at the end.
First penalty is well given, the second penalty is absurd. There are incidents in the first that of course, how it could have taken maybe a decision that would penalise as much, and it's fair to say. But on that momentum, I think maybe it's a shift of the running of the game. Anyway, it's massive decisions in both games against United, and I just take it on board in the Premiership. You expect it to be games without mistakes between the top teams, and it's not like that. Anyway, it's very, very disappointed. It's a big disappointment for everybody. You know, coming from a situation where we were 3-0 ahead and finishing 3-3, great comeback for United for sure. Great commitment and great desire.
A third Goodison Park Premier League defeat would come after the United game, as the Toffees would comfortably beat Chelsea 2-0. The fifth round of the FA Cup would come up next, as Chelsea hosted Birmingham City at Stamford Bridge. David Murphy would give the visitors the lead. Chelsea were then awarded a penalty just 3 minutes later, but Juan Mata would have his penalty saved by Colin Doyle. In the second half, Daniel Sturridge would show once again that Chelsea could rely on him, as he headed in an equaliser from a lovely cross from Ivanovic to take it to a replay. Drogba and Kalou would be on the bench for this game, returning from the Africa Cup of Nations, and there were reports that Drogba gave Chelsea a half-time team talk in the tunnel. However, both Drogba and Villas-Boas would deny this. The Champions League would return and Chelsea would be drawn against Napoli. Didier Drogba would captain Chelsea in John Terry's absence. Ashley Cole and Frank Lampard would find themselves on the bench. Villas-Boas would say Ashley Cole was on the bench for fitness reasons, though it wasn't clear why Lampard wasn't starting. But Swinger would only last 12 minutes and Cole was brought on for the remainder of the game. The Blues made the perfect start as Juan Mata capitalised on Cannavaro's mistake and gave Chelsea a vital away goal. A fine strike from Lavezzi was the equaliser for the hosts, but the Italians would not stop there as Cavani snuck in the goal before half-time. Lavezzi got his second of the night as he took advantage of Chelsea's dismal defending. Ashley Cole was the hero as he prevented Napoli getting a fourth goal. Serious work had to be done at Stamford Bridge in the second leg as the Blues were 3-1 down and the pressure on Villas-Boas was seriously mounting. He defended his lineup after many questioned his decisions. Bolton were then beaten 3-0 at the Bridge, courtesy of Luiz, Drogba and Lampard, who became the first player in Premier League history to score at least 10 goals in 9 consecutive seasons. On Saturday, 3rd of March 2012, Chelsea would travel to the Hawthorns to face West Brom. The Blues had their chances, but would ultimately lose 1-0 thanks to Gareth McCauley's late goal. This would prove to be Villas-Boas' last game as Chelsea manager, as Roman Abramovich would sack the Portuguese after just 9 months in charge. Chelsea's owner would lose patience with the 34-year-old after the Blues produced too many poor results and performances. Despite Mata and Sturridge shining under AVB, he was not getting the best out of 50 million man Fernando Torres. Defending was also a big weakness of Chelsea throughout the season. The Blues never really looked like title contenders from day one. Villas-Boas' men have failed to show any consistency, and it is also widely reported that he never had the dressing room to begin with. He was unable to deal with the leaders and big characters, reports suggest. Abramovich would turn to fan favourite Roberto Di Matteo. Chelsea's former player would take the reins for the remainder of the season. The Di Matteo era got off to the perfect start, as Chelsea would win a tricky trip to St Andrews in the FA Cup 5th round replay. Mata and a superb Raul Morales goal would put Chelsea safely through to the next round. It would be 2 wins out of 2 for Chelsea's new interim manager, as Stoke were beaten 1-0 at Stamford Bridge. Drogba scored his 100th Premier League goal for Chelsea, as it was enough to secure 3 points. Di Matteo's third game in as many competitions would be up next on the 14th of March 2012 in a massive do-or-die game against Napoli in the second leg of the Champions League last 16 tie. A super cross from Ramirez would find Didier Drogba's head, and the big man for the big occasion would put Chelsea 1-0 up. Skipper John Terry got Chelsea second in the second half. Another header scored, this time from Frank Lampard's corner. The visitors got a big away goal thanks to a sublime strike from Goklan Inla. Petr Cech pulled off a big save from Zuniga to keep Chelsea in the tie. Chelsea were then awarded a penalty in the 75th minute thanks to a stonewall handball from De Sena. Super Frank would smash home to take the tie to extra time. Ivanovic scored a striker-esque finish in the first half of extra time. Brilliant work on the right-hand side from Ramirez would tee off Drogba, who would then do a great turn to square it to the Serbian. The comeback was complete as Chelsea produced a stunning performance. The old guard would prove that they still had plenty in them after being written off in the season. No doubt one of the greatest nights in Chelsea's history. Leicester City would then visit Stamford Bridge the following Sunday for a place in the FA Cup semi-finals. Gary Cahill would score his first goal for the club, and he would pay tribute to his former Bolton teammate Fabrice Muamba, who tragically suffered a cardiac arrest and collapsed on the pitch just the day before in Bolton's FA Cup away trip to Tottenham. Thankfully, Muamba survived and is still alive and well as of the recording of this video. He unfortunately had to retire due to this at the age of just 24 in August 2012. Torres would set up Kalou to put Di Matteo's men 2-0 up. Chelsea's number 9 would get on the score sheet for the first time in 25 games. Beckford pulled one back for the visitors. El Nino would score once again to restore the hosts' 2-goal cushion. Ben Marshall scored a spectacular goal for the Fighting Foxes, but Morelos would slot in his goal from a Torres pass. 2 goals and 2 assists from the Spanish striker, no doubt his best game in the Chelsea shirt so far. The Blues faithful were hoping that the old Torres would be making a comeback under Di Matteo's management. City was up next for the Blues. Despite a good performance, the title chasers would inflict Di Matteo his first defeat as Chelsea manager as they won 2-1. Spurs would hold Chelsea to a goalless draw at Stamford Bridge. The Blues remained 5th, 5 points behind their London rivals. The first leg of the Champions League quarter-finals would be away to Benfica. Di Matteo would make a bold choice, leaving Drogba on the bench and opt in for Salomon Kalou instead. Lampard and Essien were also on the bench, but this risk paid off as the Ivorian got the only goal of the game, Torres with the assist, as the Blues produced another big win in a hard ground to win at. Another testing away game for Di Matteo as Villa away was up next. Chelsea would find themselves 2-0 up thanks to Daniel Sturridge and Branislav Ivanovic. However, Villa would pull 2 goals back. James Collins and Eric Lehigh would make it 2-2, but Chelsea would show great character as just 3 minutes later, Ivanovic got his second of the afternoon. Fernando Torres got his first Premier League goal since September as he wrapped up the 3 points. It really looked like Chelsea's record signing was turning the corner and was finally finding his feet. The first game of April was the second leg quarter-final clash at home to Benfica. Chelsea would book their place in the semi-finals with a 2-1 win over the Portuguese Eagles. Frank Lampard's penalty gave Chelsea a 2-goal cushion on aggregate. Maxi Pereira would then be sent off for the opposition, but the visitors would still manage to get a goal. Javi Garcia would pull one back in the 85th minute as Stamford Bridge's atmosphere turned a little nervous. However, Raul Morelos would settle it by smashing it in the top corner right in front of the shed to book a semi-final battle against old enemy Barcelona. Wigan were out next and Chelsea would leave it late once again. Branislav Ivanovic would score his 3rd Premier League goal in 2 games, however it was a controversial one as the Serbian appeared offside. Diame would wallop a goal in to make it 1-1 in the 82nd minute, however Juan Mata would be on the end of a sizzling strike from Fernando Torres that ricocheted the post and would end up hitting the Spaniard, and the ball would end up in the back of the net as Chelsea were very fortunate to get this win as Mata appeared to be offside as well. Wigan's manager Roberto Martinez was rightfully furious with the referee's decisions. Incredibly, the Blues would play just 2 days later away to Fulham. Lampard would score his 150th Premier League goal, converting his penalty. However, Clint Dempsey, who loved scoring against the Blues, would equalise as the points were shared in this Monday night game. On Sunday, the 15th of April 2012, Chelsea faced Tottenham in the FA Cup semi-finals. Liverpool were waiting for their opponents as they defeated their local rivals Everton the day before, and it would be Chelsea who would meet them in the final after destroying Spurs 5-1 at Wembley. Mr. Wembley, Didier Drogba, scored a truly fantastic goal after a brilliant ball from Lampard. Juan Mata scored another controversial goal as he put Chelsea 2-0 up, but all of the ball did not appear to go over the line. Gareth Bale would score a tap-in to give Tottenham hope. Ramirez got a well-deserved goal, making it 3-1. A spectacular free kick from Frank Lampard would put Chelsea 4-1 up before a cool finish from Malouda gave Chelsea one of their best ever wins over any rival. One final confirmed and one to go as the Blues were looking to seal a place in the Champions League final. Holders Barcelona were in their way, and no doubt Chelsea faced a colossal test as they were facing one of the best sides football has ever seen. The Blues were looking to avenge their very controversial 2009 semi-final heartbreak against the Catalans. The Blues would win 1-0 on the night as Pep Guardiola's men failed to take their chances, and once again Drogba stepped up for the Blues, and Chelsea's number 11 would get the only goal as the hosts won the first leg. A crucial clean sheet after many expected Barcelona to be too good for the Blues. Chelsea's schedule did not get any more generous as Arsenal away was up next. However, the Blues managed a solid clean sheet and point at the Emirates in a pretty uneventful game. Barcelona away was up next, with Chelsea having one foot in the final. However, the tie was far from over. Sergio Busquets' tap-in evened the tie on aggregate. John Terry would be sent off for violent conduct towards Alexis Sanchez. Chelsea's evening went from bad to worse as Andreas Iniesta would score just as he did 3 years prior. Barcelona were now 2-0 up against 10-man Chelsea, and it looked like it would be one step too far for the Blues. However, just before half-time, Brazilian Ramirez would score a sensational goal, chip in Valdez thanks to a brilliant through ball from Lampard. This would be voted Chelsea's goal of the season as the Blues were going through on away goals as it stood. Barcelona were awarded the penalty early in the second half. Lionel Messi incredibly hit the bar, and he would also hit the post later in the game as his goal drought against Chelsea continued. Chelsea would park the bus and defend with their lives as Barcelona kept attacking. Ashley Cole would hoof the ball up to Fernando Torres, and he would find himself one-on-one with Victor Valdez, with the 50 million man going past his Spanish teammate to sensationally send Chelsea to the Champions League final in unforgettable scenes at the Nou Camp. The Blues had done the unthinkable, coming back from 2-0 down to 2-2 with 10 men after having their skipper sent off, who did apologise for what he had done on the pitch. Roberto Di Matteo was the second manager in Chelsea's history to put the Blues in the Champions League final. 4 years earlier, a manager who took over from a sacked Portuguese manager mid-season would guide Chelsea in the Champions League final. However, Di Matteo would be hoping to go one step further than Avram Grant did, as Chelsea would be the ultimate underdog as they would book a place in the final to the team whose stadium was hosting the final. On top of this, Chelsea would also be without captain John Terry, Ramirez, Raul Morelos and Branislav Ivanovic. The Serbian only found out in his post-match interview that he would not be playing in the final.
Can you clear one thing up for us? Were you booked after the penalty?
Yeah, I booked.
You know that means you're out of the final now?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that means you don't play in the final.
Fortunately.
It was near mission impossible for the Blues to win the trophy that had eluded them for a near decade. Chelsea finished their week off with a brilliant 6-1 win over West London rivals QPR. Torres got his first hat-trick in the Chelsea shirt. academy defender Sam Hutchinson would make his first appearance for the club ever since he was forced to retire in 2010. Hutchinson had to retire from professional football at the age of just 21 due to a recurring knee injury, but in December 2011 he made a fantastic recovery and was able to come out of retirement, and he signed a new 1.5-year contract with Chelsea following a significant improvement with his knee. Newcastle were up next for the Blues. The Geordies were having a fantastic season and were pushing for the top 4 and were going to the game 1 point ahead of Chelsea in 5th place, mainly due to the deadly strike duo of Demba Ba and Pathé Cissé. The visitors would win 2-0 as Di Matteo rested the likes of Drogba, Lampard, Cole and Juan Mata for the upcoming FA Cup final that would be played 3 days later. Cissé would continue his goal-scoring form as he got both goals. His opener was a quality goal, but in the 94th minute, the Senegalese striker scored arguably the greatest goal the Premier League has ever seen to wrap up the 3 points. On Saturday, 5th of May 2012, Chelsea faced Liverpool in the FA Cup final at Wembley Stadium. Ramirez would become the first Brazilian to score in an FA Cup final as he fired Chelsea into the lead in the 11th minute. The Blues would double their lead in the second half. Of course, it was Didier Drogba who would bury his finish from Lampard's pass. The Ivorian made history as he scored his 4th FA Cup final goal in 4 appearances, becoming the only player to do this as of a recording of this video. Andy Carroll took advantage of sloppy play by Jose Buswinga with an impressive finish. Liverpool's number 9 very nearly made it 2-2. Many were convinced that it went in, however all of the ball did not quite go in as Petr Cech pulled off an amazing save as Chelsea would hold on to win 2-1 and won the FA Cup for the 4th time in 6 years. Just 2 months after taking charge, and Di Matteo had already won a trophy as Chelsea manager. 1 final one and 1 to go. Ashley Cole also became the most successful player in FA Cup history as he won the cup for the 7th time in his career. A truly fantastic day in Chelsea's history. Just 3 days later, Liverpool would somewhat gain revenge on the Blues as they beat a much-changed Chelsea side 4-1. This defeat meant that Chelsea would have to win the Champions League in order to play in the competition the next season, as their hopes of finishing the top 4 had ended on that night. The Blues would end the Premier League season with a win, beating Blackburn Rovers 2-1. Lukaku set up John Terry for the first of the afternoon. Just 3 minutes later, Raul Meireles doubled the hosts' lead. Yakubu pulled one back for the already relegated Blackburn Rovers, but the Blues held on for a victory. As the Premier League season ended, Chelsea would finish outside of the top 4 for the first time in 10 years. On the 19th of May 2012, Chelsea would face Bayern Munich in the Champions League final. The Blues were looking to end their Champions League hoodoo by winning the competition for the first time in their history. Bayern Munich were heavy favourites as their stadium was hosting the final, on top of Chelsea missing many key players. Ryan Bertrand would unprecedentedly make his Champions League debut in the final as he started on the left wing. A very tense, cagey final. Chelsea had a big let-off as Frank Ribery would score, but it would be ruled out for offside. In the 83rd minute, Thomas Muller would breach Chelsea's stubborn defence as he headed Bayern into the lead. Torres would come on for Kalou, and he would win Chelsea's first corner of the game. Just 5 minutes later, Juan Mata would cross it in, and Chelsea's hero Didier Drogba would equalise for the Blues with a thumping header. 9 goals in 9 finals for Chelsea's legendary striker, a truly remarkable achievement for the Ivorian. The tie would go to extra time, and Drogba went from hero to villain as he fouled Frank Ribery, and Bayern were awarded a penalty. Former Chelsea player Ian Robbins stepped up, but Petr Cech was the hero as he saved his former teammate's penalty. Another big man for the big occasion as Big Pete kept their dream alive. The final would go to penalties, and the spot kicks would be taken in front of the Bayern Munich fans. Cech would get a hand to Philipp Lahm's penalty, but it would just creep in to make it 1-0 Bayern. Juan Mata would have his penalty saved by Manuel Neuer. Mario Gomez would make it 2-0 to Bayern. David Luiz scored Chelsea's first spot kick with a fantastic long run-up penalty. Keeper versus keeper was up next as Manuel Neuer scored his penalty. The skipper for the night, in the absence of John Terry, Frank Lampard, would step up and he would smash it in. Cech would heroically save Olich's penalty, and Ashley Cole then evened it out by scoring his. Bastian Schweinsteiger would hit the post, and Chelsea were now one kick away from Champions League glory. It was written in the stars as Didier Drogba stepped up and sent Neuer the wrong way, as the legendary striker, who done so much for the club since he signed in 2004, would win Chelsea their first ever Champions League. Chelsea Football Club were finally kings of Europe after many years of hurt, and it couldn't have been done in a more fairy tale way. This was Drogba's final kick for the club until he returned for a second spell in 2014. Chelsea striker deservingly was awarded UEFA Man of the Match, and Petr Cech would be awarded Fans Man of the Match after his amazing performance. Petr Cech was an absolute hero on this night. He saved Ian Robben's penalty in extra time, saved Olich's penalty in the shootout, and guessed the right way each time the host took a penalty. The keeper would reveal in an interview that he spent hours and hours studying Bayern Munich's penalty takers, and it would for sure pay off.
Say one thing to my little girls, my little girls are back home, and I told you Chelsea were the best team in the world, and tonight we are. Get in there!
On the outside, are you still calm on the inside?
Yeah, I'm enjoying this moment, and I just like to go out and celebrate now with the players.
And should it happen that when it does come to talking to the manager that you don't get the job, will that hurt? I mean, surely you've done enough now, Roberto. You didn't want to talk about it before the match, but now?
I won't talk about it now. I just want to enjoy the moment. That's all I care about now.
You've earned that. Well done.
Nottingham Forest won this trophy at the old Olympic Stadium in 1979, and now this wonderful football arena will forever be linked with an improbable Chelsea success.
After a season full of up and downs and being written off continuously, Chelsea Football Club defied the odds and became the first, and to date the only team from London to win the Champions League. The 19th of May 2012 was without a doubt the greatest night in the club's history, and they had qualified at the expense of Tottenham, who would miss out on the Champions League the following season, as Chelsea would take their place as holders of the competition. Roberto Di Matteo had done what so many managers had failed to do, and the club legend delivered Roman Abramovich the trophy he wanted the most, on top of winning the FA Cup. Di Matteo would deservingly be named Chelsea's permanent manager in June 2012, and of course we will look into the next season in my next video. Thank you so much for watching. Without a doubt the greatest season in Chelsea's history. Please remember to like, comment and subscribe, and follow me on X. Please take care.